stress straight away, we are not talking about a cult here. Or do you think we are?
Well, if I was to answer that question, I might have to appear in court, because Scientology, like other groups, are well known for being highly litigious. So let's just say that we're talking about a group about which we're very concerned.
All right. Why should we be concerned when somebody is converted to Scientology, in your mind?
Again, one has to be cautious as to what one says, but what I would say is that in 27 years of working full-time as a specialist in this field, I've had many hundreds of calls of complaint from families and friends of loved ones who've become involved in Scientology, along with many hundreds of other groups as well. And those that have contacted me about their concerns for loved ones in Scientology have indicated that these people have changed, in their opinion, changed for the worse. They are usually alienated from the family, or will be as time goes by. And they want help. They want to understand this better, and they want to look at ways forward. And for those people that have been successful in, shall we say, rescuing loved ones from that group, however the loved ones have come out, they've normally taken a tremendously long time to recover. In fact, the researchers Conway and Siegelman published back in January of 1982 in Science Digest an article called Information Disease, and according to their research, the average person leaving Scientology took 25.6 months to recover.
But the people who are recruited, in quotes, they are free to change that decision, to opt out at any point, aren't they?
Well, that's what Scientology would say.
Well, what keeps them there?
Again, we're getting into a difficult area. If we forget Scientology and we talk about the area that we specialize in, which is cults, then by definition a cult is a group that uses psychologically coercive techniques to recruit people. And this is normally achieved, i.e. the control of the individual is normally achieved in the average cult in 3 or 4 days. So that the argument is for a typical cult that the cult member no longer can exercise free will and can no longer choose to leave. And of course, again, I want to state I'm not labeling any particular group.
Indeed.
In that way.
Have you dealt with Scientologists specifically and face-to-face over some of the issues you've just discussed?
I've certainly, in 27 years, had a lot of dealings with the Scientology organization. In fact, I helped the police in Canada, the Ontario Provincial Police, in the form of Sergeant Ciampini back in the early 80s. He was very interested in and concerned about Scientology and wanted my help and any advice I could give him and contact with ex-members to see what might be going on behind the scenes. He contacted many people, and it led to the biggest raid in Canadian history, where 100 police officers raided the headquarters of Scientology. It led to criminal charges, and so today Scientology in Canada is seen to be the first religion with a criminal record, which is rather interesting. I've dealt with Scientology members who've come along to lectures that I've been given that have been publicly advertised, and they've tried to disrupt the proceedings, which is understandable from their perspective. And I've had, shall we say, a lot of interest in my work from individual Scientologists, people who are with what used to be known as the Guardian's Office. It's now called the Office of Special Affairs. It's their sort of, I guess we could describe it as their police force. And they don't seem to like the sort of work that I do in trying to help individuals and families, and I've been the subject of various comments over the years and smears as well.
Ian Howe, thank you very much for the moment. We will talk more to you, and inevitably, of course, we are going to hear the other side of the argument as well. When we return in a few moments' time, more secret recordings from inside Scientology's London branch as we investigate how they target disasters around the world and their attitude to psychiatry.
There is a sense of the ridiculous in place. Scientology is in no position to criticize psychiatry. because Scientology itself could not possibly demonstrate a rational basis for what it thinks.
We'd like to hear your thoughts on this as well. What do you think about Scientology's work with trauma victims? Perhaps you are a victim or approached yourself, or you are a Scientologist who has attended a major disaster. 85058 to send a text message. You can email julian@bbc.co.uk. You're listening to Julian Warwicker on 5 Live with you until 1 o'clock this morning, sitting alongside the banks of the River Thames in West London as a 10-kilometre sponsored riverside walk in aid of cancer research takes place. And we'll talk more about the issues raised by that event in the final hour of the programme. If you can hear noises off, it's because one or two families and others are gathering outside the pub here, maybe for an early lunch or a late coffee. A few joggers and strollers going by. There's a bit of rowing going on the Thames as well. Life continues after yesterday at around about 6:30, rest assured. Back to this morning's 5 Live report. If you've been listening for the last quarter of an hour, mind games, Scientology versus psychiatry. We've heard this morning how volunteer ministers from Scientology rushed to the London bombings and to 9/11 to offer what they call assists to victims. We've also been hearing secret recordings of senior members of the Church of Scientology explaining that the reason they were there was to keep trained psychiatrists away from trauma victims. Our reporter is Elodie Harper. Did the Scientologists you recorded say that they concentrated their efforts mainly on trauma victims in the US and the UK?
Actually, quite the opposite. Paul Fletcher, the leader of the group we attended, told us he was first recruited by CCHR to keep an eye on the work of psychiatrists who were helping people in the wake of the tsunami.
I went to India when the tsunami struck, just to help out on the relief effort. And I got called from CCHR. They were worried that they might be trying to divert the relief money to saying that, oh, we can help them, give us the money and just to buy loads of drugs. So that's when I went out there, I sort of met with the psychiatrist who had been pinpointed, identified. So I did a lot of research as to what psychiatry was up to over there. And I found out, they've got this plan like in the States they did. They've got this plan to actually infiltrate all the medical centres throughout India, teach the GPs and the nurses how to identify the mentally disturbed, and then prescribe the medications that go with it. Because there aren't enough psychiatrists in India. There's only about 3,200.
So what Paul Fletcher did in India was campaign against further funding for psychiatric treatment in the wake of the tsunami, even though, as we heard there, he admits that mental health care in India is already underfunded and understaffed.
Yes, exactly. And the tsunami is only one of several disaster sites Scientology has targeted. Scientology's volunteer ministers can always be identified by their bright yellow T-shirts, and we found that they appear at disaster zones such as Hurricane Katrina, Beslan, and most recently the Indonesian earthquake. Now, in the aftermath of the tsunami, Dutchman Kaz de Jong was sent to Sri Lanka for the Médecins Sans Frontières aid agency. He was told by the Scientologists there that they were practicing something they called trauma therapy. But he also witnessed the Scientologists distributing their literature, which only confused already traumatized local people.
One of the things we were observing was that they handed out leaflets and books. We saw the days after their visit that people were confused about what was going on, whether the medical services were also used for other purposes, like distributing books and leaflets and materials. Well, my personal opinion is that medical services should be strictly medical, because people who attend medical services are very vulnerable and extremely dependent. And medical professional, you should keep up the medical ethics and only provide medical care and do medical acts. And it should be beyond any doubt that there are other activities done under the pretext of medical care.
Now, this week I met Dr. Philip Hodgson, who is an expert in stress counselling and trauma care, and also a spokesperson for the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy. He told us he was very troubled by Scientologists practising touch assists, as touching a patient is strictly forbidden in psychological counselling.
What do you feel about Scientologists practising touch assists on trauma victims after 7/7?
I think that the idea that a stranger who belongs to a particularly aggressive, proselytizing evangelical group or organization coming along to do touch therapy, is it what is needed? Or are we actually looking for, if you like, propaganda-free touch and support, ideally from people with whom you feel safe because you know them? I don't understand the reasons for any organized group of people without training trailing around disaster sites, unless they see it as an opportunity to further their own particular form of propaganda or religion or organisation or whatever it is that they call themselves. I think it's lamentable, and I think from the point of view of professional and organised therapy in this country, we would see it as behaviour which is something that we could never ever support.
Max Pemberton, I'm assuming you would agree with Philip Hodgson.
Absolutely. I find this all very worrying.